Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by somebody that I'm a huge fan of, the absolutely amazing Yutaka. Yutaka, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing very well. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. I'm glad we were finally able to make this connection happen. But before we talk about why you're here, I would like the people that don't know you to get to know you for a little bit. Um, you grew up with an attraction to horror films. You worked at a video store for many years.
Mhm.
God bless you. My parents owned a mom and pop video store, so I grew up in a video store.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I definitely understand and appreciate that. And obviously, that only fueled your fire. Seeing all, I try to explain to people, for people that are our age, YouTube was walking up and down the horror aisle, looking at all the cover arts, trying to determine what movie you wanted to take home that night. Like,
Absolutely. That was like the best thing about when you were a kid, Friday nights sometimes just going like to the video store and what's the new releases, looking at the new release wall, and then if you don't see anything, always go back to your classics.
go to the horror section.
Mhm.
Always. Well, I mean, and obviously, being a big horror fan, working in a video store, your knowledge of horror and film in general grew. So, during the pandemic, you met some great friends. You guys decided to start the podcast. So,
Yes.
what is the name of the podcast, and what do you guys do over there?
A multitude of things. And I say that because so it's called the Horror Hour because there are so many other names, but they're all taken. So we're like, we'll go with that. And well, we do reviews, and we do interviews, which I always have to shout out Shudder because they gave us the chance. So, and I'm always very appreciative of that.
Love Shudder, my favorite streaming service, hands down, bar none.
Exactly. And so then we also then have an actual podcast episode, which is more adult in terms of it's filthy, it's gutted, it's rotted, and it's just a bunch of queens in a sense just bitching about horror and doing slight digs at each other for the fun of it.
Well, and it's amazing because you have also collaborated with many amazing revolutionary channels. And the best part is you guys don't have to go searching for the podcast because I have the links down here in the description, as well as all of the Horror Hours social media links. So you can follow them on social media and make sure that you're subscribing to the podcast so you could check that out. So, wait, how many people do you have as a part of the podcast as of the recording date?
We have a core group of 4, and we have somebody who they're a YouTuber full time, and so they are certainly part of the Horror Hour, but we're kind of second to that, and that's we're just thankful that he graces us with his presence because the wit on this man, it's just like it's hilarious. And but yeah, so there's in a sense 5, but there's 4 like core members.
Sure. And it's amazing because when you have that many people, you are obviously going to have many different opinions. And that's something about the horror world that we all know is we are all opinionated and we're all strong in our opinions. So I just got to know, just as a behind the scenes guy that works with a partner, obviously my wife, what's the most heated argument you guys have gotten over a topic?
Oh, okay. That's easy. I mean, goodness. So the great thing about the podcast is we're all different age groups in a sense. So we all have what we grew up with or what is horror to us. And so one of our biggest debates is another co-host, George, love him to death. He lives across the pond, but he does not like Laurie Strode at all. Like he will dog Laurie Strode, and it's hilarious because I'm like, George, I was like, we have all these other final girls because of Laurie Strode, just like the blueprint. And I go, and as much as I truly do love Wes Craven, I mean, he's my all-time favorite in terms of creators, but I'm like, George, things do exist outside of Woodsboro. So I get, like, I love Sydney, and those characters, but I'm like, it is just funny because you'll see us, like, we will get heated. Or if, I just want to be shady, I'll bring up the name Laurie Strode and he'll get really pissy. So it's
Well, I mean, in George's defense, Sydney's never died in her franchise, and Laurie's died twice. In his defense,
no. It's a very that is a very good point. And I think this last one, I think the last time he said that, I'm pretty sure I might have been Liam. He's like, yeah, but at least Laurie finished out her franchise. I'm like, oh, I was like, no. So it'll get a little
right?
catty,
See,
but
I'm also on the boat of when we're talking about Halloween and stuff Jason 0-0 against Busta Rhymes. Michael 0-1. So
yes.
I just want to throw that out there for anybody listening. Jason's got he's batting 0, but it's better than negative. Michael has lost to Busta. So
this is true. With a with a bicycle kick. Oh my gosh.
Dangertainment, motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
But if you guys, like I said, if you want more of this banter, make sure you're subscribing to the podcast and following them on social media. And you can do that very easily just by clicking the links down here in the description. So in order for you to have a platform that talks about horror all the time, horror had to start for you somewhere, Yutaka. So I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Yutaka, your first horror movie was
Alien.
What a great start. This is a movie that I will die on the hill because I hear a lot of arguments about Alien and Jaws. Are they horror? Are they not horror? 100%. And it's just like with Predator and Terminator. Yes, they're horror movies, and I will go as far as to say Terminator is one of the best slasher films I've ever seen in my entire life. You go through the phone book to kill every Sarah Connor, okay?
That's actually true.
Now, what would you say? Do you remember how old you were the first time you would see an Alien?
I could even set the stage on this one. Absolutely. I was 6 years old. And I remember, I was a little kid. I just remember sitting in our living room growing up and an old setup, the couch was on my right and, sliding glass door on the left and folks in the kitchen, my parents are in the kitchen cooking chili and rice. So I remember all of that. It was nighttime and I shouldn't have been watching Alien, but it was on the TV and I couldn't I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I was terrified, but I was also just incredibly excited. I'm like, what is this? And then from there, I took a leap to The Exorcist, which I would never do again. Great film, but I had super religious neighbors, so there was kind of that, oh, that could happen. They just so there's some childhood trauma, I guess. But yeah, so Alien is just it's a comfort movie, honestly. What I grew up with.
Yeah, and tell me, top 5 creature designs. Right here. This is what an amazing creature design this is. And real quick,
mine right back there too.
Yes, just a little caveat to what you were just saying. The Exorcist is one that will always be special to me too, because like I said, I grew up with very young parents, and my grandparents owned a video store, which my parents, pretty much, we lived at.
Mm-hmm.
And The Exorcist is the only film my mother ever shut off and was like, no, we're not doing this. This is too much. So I get, I will always have that stigma around The Exorcist as well. So I definitely understand where you're coming from on that. Now with Alien, is this a movie that, you had a multiple time viewing the first time you had seen it, or was it one that you watched, you were like, I'm good, I'm straight, I don't need to see that no more?
I think it's because I was so young that I can't say I got to watch it so on repeat. But it's funny because I think we grew up, I grew up in a household where obviously horror, they're like, oh, I have a twin, so they're like, oh, they're watching TV, just leave them be, which that's cool because I got to watch a lot, and I mean a lot of horror. So I probably wouldn't say I got to really rewatch Alien until maybe around 11 or 12.
Sure.
Because the first time I watched it, I didn't even know really what I was watching. I just knew I loved it. And then it was only years later I found out it was Alien. I'll go, oh. So yeah, I would say now it's like I would say bi-monthly viewing.
Mhm.
It's just something good about that movie.
One of the few VHSs I still own, and I'm
Oh,
talking about like the
I'm
original
jealous.
VHS. If
I
this is a
am
repurchase,
jealous.
like
Oh my god, I wish. I wish.
like
Oh my
don't
god.
get me wrong, I love watching movies on Blu-ray. I love watching 4K. I love that. But then there's certain movies like Alien that graininess of the tracking just really, it takes us back. And I feel like it looks better with that dark graininess. When you start to enhance it and lighten it up, it takes away a lot of the fear of the unknown that comes with a movie like Alien. So
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, that's why I still own the VHS. That was the first VHS I ever showed my son. Those are movies that they deserve to stay in that time capsule, just because when you brighten them up, you enhance them, it takes away some of the fear that you had of the film. Um, and while we're on the subject of the fear of Alien, um, a movie that has scared people since it came out, and it's a movie that still, I mean, even on set, obviously, we know the great practical joke of not telling anybody about the bursar. But
That's so wild. I love it.
I love that too. Genuine reactions. But which scene would you say it was that affected you the most?
I always I always say I'm like, I'm not claustrophobic. You know what? I probably am. Because I think of like the descent and I'm like, oh my God, that gave me like palpitations or anxiety. But it was when Dallas was going through like the vents. And as a kid, I had the lights out and I was just like solely focused on what he was doing. And so that, and then with the score, and then that final like that jump scare. Oh my God,
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, I think that's what, like, because of that, and obviously the chest burster, um,
Yeah.
you know, that's what like solidified. I'm like, whatever this is, didn't know at the time, was like, I love this.
Mhm. Well, and everybody that knows me personally or knows the podcast knows what I'm going to say, but I don't condone drug use. If you do and you can use drugs responsibly, to people out there that are watching, good for you. That's good. The point is being responsible. Horror movies is my drug, and that first horror movie I watched, which was House from 1986, still my favorite horror movie to
Ooh,
this day.
that's a good one.
I got that high of watching a horror movie, and then you're always chasing that dragon, trying to get that feeling again. And starting with a movie like Alien, you have genuine scares. You have the idea of being trapped someplace that you can't just walk out the door and run away. You have
Mm-hmm.
great real jump scares in the film. You have a final girl that you're rooting like hell for. Like we were talking about Final Girls a little bit ago, and how much better Sydney is than Lori. But we could. I'm sorry, I had to put that little poke in there. If you're watching, George, got your back,
I
buddy.
know.
Um,
I'm gonna have to, like, I'm totally gonna make a note of that and be like, you know what? I'm like, watch this exact moment.
but I mean, you look at Sigourney Weaver, Ripley.
Mm-hmm.
What a badass, man.
Absolutely.
And this was at a time when still we're I've always said the 70s and 80s part of horror, even back to 68. You look at Night of the Living Dead 68, and you have Barbara, but she's not really a final girl in that movie. Sure, Patricia Tallman's Barbara in the remake was a total badass final girl,
Yes. Agreed.
but until you got, your Black Christmas, your
Oh,
Texas Chainsaw, your
yes.
Halloween, these are where your final girls really started to come into fruition. And the fact that not every single woman out there needs a big, strong man there to protect them. So horror has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to social issues,
Oh
political
yeah.
talk, and putting LGBTQ strong women in the forefront. So that's something that horror has always had, that inclusiveness. That's why I fucking hate the term woke horror. I think it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my
Oh
life,
my
because
God.
woke horror
Yep.
started back in 1932 with the Phantom of the Opera. So, if
Right.
you really want to get technical with it, that's what we're doing. But um, Alien is one of these movies that like I said a little bit ago, it's really stood the test of time. And you still have people out there that are talking about it. And arguably created one of the best crossovers of all time, at least most well known, with the Alien vs Predator.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody, whether it was the old arcade game or the old Sega Genesis game or the movies,
Okay,
we
that Sega
love,
Genesis game was the shit.
wasn't it?
Okay.
It was dope. People were talking Sonic, and I was talking Alien vs Predator. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it's a movie that like I said, it's its own time capsule. You could make a time capsule of just Alien and all the amazing things that's gone into it. But what would you say your favorite scene from the film is?
You know, I think I think my favorite scene, obviously there's what we would all expect, but I also really loved when you found out that Ash was a robot. And then when he actually tries to kill Ripley, because it's just this entire time I'm sitting here worried about a damn alien on a spaceship, and now I got this man to deal with. Where did like it just I remember I was like, it threw me for a loop. And I think Ian Holmes was an awesome actor, and I really loved that portrayal. And so yeah, that like also the idea, I was like, what, when as a kid, I'm like, what is he doing? And like now I'm like, yeah, he's choking her by like trying to shove like rolled up magazines. I was like, that's crazy. And so
Mhm.
yeah, it's love that
And
scene.
obviously, the head, knocked off and the milk flying everywhere. Like,
Yes.
we always talked about as a kid, like how much crazier would that have been if they used like a red blood type substance. And now, as an adult, I'm like, I'm glad they went with that milky type substance, because to me now as an adult, it adds more of that foreign fear. If they would have
Mm-hmm.
used red blood type stuff, we go back to humanoid. We go back to that's a human. But with that white milky stuff, it's like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's just little moments like that that are so brilliant that not a lot of people would have thought of. A lot of people, let's make it as bloody and gory. Sam Raimi had this film, that'd have been blood everywhere. There'd have been just blood all over the place.
I
But
I'm the first to say I am a true gore whore. Like the more gore the better, but I still do I love horror in general, but I will say yes, like this movie didn't really need the gore as to go gory. Like it had its one moment that I think is like that's just iconic. Uh but yeah, no, I don't know if I would have enjoyed that scene if it was blood. And on top of that, I guarantee like back then, like the rating for that would have
oh,
been
they would have
yeah.
cut that scene so fast in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. That was right back when Jason was going through production hell because of the MPAA and all that. So, and I do want to say real quick, also, when you're talking about the gore horror and stuff like that, like in my marriage, with me and Ashley, and obviously people on the channel, Ash, she's the gore horror of the group, dude. Like, she's like, let's watch Saw, and I'm like, let's watch The Notebook. I'm the lovey guy, and
What? No.
like, dead serious, man. Like, I am the like when
Not
it
the
comes to
notebook.
oh, dude, I love The Notebook, man. If you're a bird, I'm a bird. I fucking love The Notebook. It's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I'm a big love story guy, dead serious. Like, especially if we're talking just non-horror films, Notebook is in my top 10 easily. I'm a huge love story guy. I love a good love story. I've been married since high school, man. Me and my wife been together 17 years. So a good love story, it's got me hooked because I live one every day. So, but we're not here to talk about love. Let's get some gore now. Let's talk about the kills. Alien has its fair share of kills. Which kill would you say is your favorite from the movie?
I mean, it's you don't really get to see a lot of it. I know, like I think with the director's cut, you really did, but I loved the sequence, and because I'm so bad with names, let me just grab this. But it's when yes, Parker and Lambert are trying to like load all that stuff up, and it's just that sequence, just the dread and all of that, uh, and you really don't see like I loved the fact that you don't see Lambert's kill, you just see the tail and then you just hear the scream. I love that. There's just something that's very eerie and off-putting. So again, which is funny because I'm like, more gore, but I'm like, that scene was that death was just so effective. And so that's honestly my favorite.
You can be super scary and super terrifying without gore. And that's
Oh,
just
absolutely.
one of the scariest movies I've ever seen is actually a new release from 2 years ago, and there's very little gore in it. It's The Dark and the Wicked. It's a Shudder original. That movie terrified me. It scared me so bad. Now, and I do got to give some love for the chest burster scene, guys. We hinted at it a little while ago. If you don't know, the cast and crew didn't know about the chest burster happening, and it happened. And so all the reactions you're seeing, they're genuine reactions to that scene. So
which
had to throw some love out there. Yeah, brilliant idea. Now we talked about your first horror movie being Alien and what that movie means to you. Now it is part of a franchise. Would you say that the original is your favorite of the franchise, or is there one that you like better?
I know most people will say Aliens is their favorite, and that's fine because I do love Aliens, but no, Alien just it holds that, like, it's more, I think, like, very sentimental because it's what like introduced me to horror. But I'm a bigger fan of that more confined cast. Because with Aliens, you have a larger cast and it's very like grand scale. It's still really badass, but I don't feel it's as scary. I mean, it's got its moments, but I just don't feel like it has that sense of dread, because that's more in Aliens. You're also just not on a spaceship. You're going to,
Sure.
there's just something about it. But I love the franchise, even Resurrection.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, Aliens, and obviously, as everybody knows, it's one of the top 5 sequels of all time. I don't think anybody can argue that. But where I will agree with you on, where I feel like Alien and the Terminator are horror films, Aliens and T2 Judgment Day are more action sci-fi with horror in the background. They still have their horror moments, but they focus more on the action and the sci-fi than they do the horror, unlike the original. So I completely see what you're saying with that. And now, we've talked about Alien and how important that movie is to you, and the franchise, essentially, even Resurrection. But now my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Yutaka? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
It's funny because it actually, wow, I think I have a new top. So it actually goes back and forth. So it's either Alien or Scream. And that's just because, I had the one that introduced me to horror, but then Scream really just, in a sense, I remember seeing that in theaters when it came out. One of the first like real like rated R horror films that I got to see in a theater. And I just remember, the fact that, what the hell, there's this killer running around, and that's scary, and I think also we had Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson like basically turn everything on its head, which was great. It was fresh, it was fun. We had this really great cast, and I mean, my gosh, but I mean, yeah, it alternates between those two, but honestly, anything Wes Craven, like,
well, Scream revolutionized horror. Whether you love or you hate horror, or I'm sorry, Scream, you can't deny the impact that Scream had on the horror genre. I mean, you look at the horror movies that came out in 94 and 95, and then the ones that came out in 97 and 98, and tell me that Scream didn't have a huge effect. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. When Scream first came out, I don't want to say I hated the movie, but I hated the movie. Like, the movie was great, but to me, it was like when Blink-182 released Enema of the State. I was like, oh, horror sold out. It's got to be cool now, and everybody loves it. And I was a cynical little punk rock kid, and I was like, oh, this is gonna make all the people that I knew that never watched horror, never liked horror, were starting to talk about how cool horror was and how cool Scream was, and I was like, fuck you, horror was cool before that.
It was.
The good thing about Scream is it showed you how to really make the perfect final girl.
Yeah, it definitely perfected. Look, I as much as I think it really perfected on the formula, and I think Nev was is incredible, and I hope we do get to see return. But again, we also have to, Gail was another final girl, And now we got Sam and Tara, hopefully
Kirby's
Mindy.
back.
And oh my gosh, like even though we all joke about, the wig or the hair, that's all right. Just so happy that she's back, though. Honestly,
we've seen Gale in Scream 3, so Kirby's wig doesn't bother me.
That's so true. That's very true. And I mean, Drew Barrymore's is really bad. If we're really gonna, and actually, that's what I want to say. If somebody were to ever ask me what's the best horror opening, like the opening scene of all time, I will still, we'll go back to Scream just because of the tension. Also, the marketing that you've got Drew Barrymore, and we all thought she was going to, live to the end. And it's a brutal kill. That chase sequence is just gnarly, like all of that. And so to me, I'm like, I mean, there are great horror openings out there, but I mean,
what's your favorite scary movie?
As you said, that scene like just revolutionized. Like, I knew some people who were so pissed and they walked out like, how dare they kill Drew? And I'm like, really? Okay, all right, queen. But I'm like, I was living for it. And even Drew's like, that was a great, like, she had so much fun with that. But yeah, I was like, there's just so many great things about Scream. And so that's why like those two just alternate for me.
Well, I mean, and you're talking about great horror opening. The first 14 minutes of Scream could be its own short film. Like, that could
my
be
God, that would be terrifying.
I look at the two best horror openings of all time are Scream and When a Stranger Calls. The original When a Stranger Calls.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, those two openings are pretty much, to me, short films. They got extended into a longer movie because you could make a short film out of the first 14 minutes of both of those movies, and it would be the perfect short film. So completely agree. And like you were saying, the marketing, a lot of people, and I'm not bashing anybody for being young, you can't help your age, but you obviously weren't around for the marketing of this film. We're like, wow, the little girl from E.T., no shit, she's gonna be in this movie. Run it, let's do this. And then she's going on all the talk shows, she's one of the main people on the poster, and then she's got it like a fish, and you're like, oh my God, little E.T., what happened? What? Phone home. Look, phone home.
I'll tell you, when not to name drop, because it's still like it still blows my mind that we spoke with Radio Silence. But I remember they were like, they were talking kills. They're like, well, if you want to be killed off, I go, oh, I want to be, put me like Casey Becker. I want to be on the marquee, but you can kill me off first. And everybody's still going to talk about it 20, 30, 40, years later.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And When a Stranger Calls, oh my gosh, that is such a, like, okay. And people also kind of like bash the remake, but the remake was more of its time, but I still love it. But man, there is just something about When a Stranger Calls, and that's another one. Like, it just builds and it builds and it builds, and and again, you didn't need blood, gore. You just needed, I mean, and back then, again, people forget cell phones didn't exist. Like, that's terrifying.
Yeah, that was genuinely scary. That was a genuinely scary moment of the film. So completely agree with you on that. And what I want to do, because I've had an amazing time with you, but before I let you go, what I want to do real quick is I want to bounce back to Alien. And what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, none of the above. We're not critics right now. What we're doing is strictly ranking Alien on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of Alien be?
I mean, because, oh gosh, I hate to sound so one note, but that's what really, that movie just, yeah, absolutely, it's a 5, because because of that movie is why I actually end up loving, or I love cinema in general. Like, it opened my eyes, because when you touched upon something that I really love is that, horror is like your adrenaline, your drug.
Yeah.
And for me, I think honestly, I think horror is so good for people's mental health, and it's good for my mental health. So it's my personal escape in a sense. And also I think horror will you'll know what to do. Well, you'll know what not to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've seen the first episode of The Last of Us or if you played the game, but that part when they're like, oh, they got kids. Nope. I'm like, absolutely. I'd keep on driving too.
Yep.
Sorry.
Keep going. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
So I do. I think horror, I think because of Alien is just what made me as a teenager also want to work in a video store. I think Scream kind of partially had something to do with that as well.
Everybody's a suspect!
But yeah, my gosh, if it weren't for Alien, like I can think of all like the films I saw as a kid that were animated or even just, I mean, I do love the Goonies. I mean, it's the Goonies. But there's just, yeah, if it weren't for Alien,
I mean, the
I wouldn't
Goonies
be
are good enough for me. You know what I mean? What's good enough for you is good enough for
yes!
me. So
Oh my god, that song's so cheesy. I love it.
oh, it's terrible. Terrible
It is,
song,
but it's so catchy.
it's so
Like,
good. Like I know, like it's funny because I still like that's another thing I used to do, and it's funny because like I've always been a huge fan of music as well. So I still have a record collection full of old like I still have the Evil Dead 2 score on vinyl. I have the Creepshow 2 score on vinyl. Like, and I used to go buy soundtracks of horror movies. Like that's how I found out about like From Autumn to Ashes from the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack. And I had the Goonies soundtrack. I had the Neverending Story soundtrack on cassette tape. You know what I mean? Like,
you know what? People just don't know the struggle of having to either flip it over or, oh my goodness.
We never knew how the first 3 seconds of a song sounded because we'd have to hit record on the radio. So we could never hear the first couple seconds of a song. So like the first couple seconds when you finally bought the tape or bought the CD, you were like, I know this song. Now it's kicked out. The DJ's not talking anymore. So dude, I get it, man. It's funny because I used to do that. You'd sit by your radio and when a cool song would come on, you'd hit record real quick and you'd always miss the first couple seconds. Or throughout the day while I was at school, I would let MTV record on a VHS so I could see, all the music videos when I got home. Like, it's just amazing going back and revisiting these things in my mind that my kids won't, if you want to watch a music video, you go on YouTube. If I wanted to watch a music video, I had to pray that it was playing on MTV before they started their Jersey Shore shit. Like, please play My Friends Over You by Newfound Glory today. Please, I need to hear this song.
Oh my God, Newfound Glory. Oh my gosh, that brings me back. I'm thinking of Point Fest, or that's the Warped Tour.
Warped Tour.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, man. I can't tell you what happened to me when I got Much Music, man. Like we had MTV and then we bought a satellite package and I got Much Music, which turned into Fuse. And like that's how I found out about like Saves the Day, Rancid, No Effects. Like my whole catalog went through the roof on punk rock when I got Much Music. And it's amazing. Punk rock and horror movies was always my thing, man. Like that's why Return of the Living Dead is so dope to me. But and we said it at the beginning, guys, and I'm going to say it now because we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, there are some social media links and an amazing fucking podcast link down here in the description that could use your guys' loving. So make sure you're subscribing to that podcast and make sure you're following all the social media links down in the description. Yutaka, don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror. Stay what you are. And we'll see you guys soon.